The future of lighting is here today. My name is Justin Miller. I'm the CEO of CleanLife. We're here at a low voltage homeowner's home, and we're going to show you how we converted this downlight to a modern DC LED fan.
The first thing to note when you're going to install your new low voltage ceiling fans, these ceiling fans are 24 volts DC. Now, you should never install your ceiling fans until you have your pre-wire from our cabinet. So step one is going to be getting into our low voltage cabinet. So these have screws in all four. I've already loosened them, and then once you loosen them, you can pull up and get into your cabinet. Now, once you're in your cabinet, you have, in this home, 3 power supplies. These are providing power to all our downlights and our bath fans throughout the entire home. Now, what you should have is extra wires inside your cabinet. These are for your ceiling fans. In order to power our ceiling fans, we need to install a 27 volt power supply into our low voltage cabinet. So before we install our ceiling fans, we have to ensure that we have power at the switch locations in our 24 volts before installing those ceiling fans. So we're here at the switch location. This is our next step in the process. I've gone ahead and removed the cover plate and the switch to expose the wiring behind the switch. When I did that, we have 2 wires that aren't attached to anything. Now, one of these wires is going from our switch location up to our downlight, and one of these wires is actually going directly back to our cabinet. That's one of those wires in the cabinet that's not attached to our current power supply. And we're going to use that wire to input from our new power supply to provide power to our ceiling fan, because our ceiling fans operate on 24 volts, so we need that 24 volt power supply to go into the switch location. Now, since there's 2 wires here, I don't know which one's going back to the cabinet. So for the next step, I'm going to use what's called a toner. You can also use a multimeter to attach to these wires and then go back to the cabinet to figure out which one is going to be used for power input. So I'm going to strip these wires and attach my gator clips, and then I'll see you guys back at the cabinet. All right, so we have our gator clips from our toner hooked up at the switch location. Now I have 4 wires here and have to figure out which one of these wires are going back to that switch location. So I'm going to use the toner and touch each of these wires till I start to hear it beep. There we go. So this is the wire that's going to that switch location where my gator clips are hooked up. So what I'm going to do is just bend it so I know that's the wire that I'm going to use for my power supply. Now I'm going to go ahead and install my 24 volt power supply so I can get power into that switch. So to do that, all we have to do is go into our box, and they come with these little push pins. So I put it in place, I push the pins, and now my driver is installed. We also come with an AC adapter. So in order to get power to our power supply line voltage, I have to jump from another power supply in the box. So that's what this cord is for. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here in the box. Now my power supply is turned on. I can see the green indicator light, and I'm going to install the DC plug as well into that power supply. And then I'm going to take those 2 wires and put them into our Wago. Now our Wago has a blue and a red. I'm going to go red to red and white to blue. Now I have 24 volts DC back to one of those wires at the switch. So now we're going to go back to the switch and show you what to do next in order to get power up to where your current disc light is for the future ceiling fan installation. So we have our gator clips set up here with our toner. We already went back to the cabinet and figured out which wire at the cabinet is attached to one of these wires. Now, as I mentioned, one of these wires is going up to the light, and one of the ones is going to be utilized for the power in from our cabinet. So I had the gator clips hooked up to both of these wires, but to figure out which one is actually going back to the cabinet, I'm then going to individually connect the gator clips to one of these at a time, go back to our cabinet with our toner to see which one is actually going from the cabinet into our switch location. Now we know that we have our wire going from the cabinet to the switch box. Now the other wire that goes up to the light, I've cut. I'm not going to utilize this wire because I already have wire going from the switch to the light. Now, the important thing we got to figure out next is which one of our wires going into the switch is going up to the light, because that's the wire that we're going to use to attach to our new input wire from the cabinet. So that way we have 24 volt powers to our switch location. Now, an easy way to determine that is your switch is switched on the red wire. Now, one of these red wires is going directly to our downlight location, and one of them is just passed through power. So if you look at the switch, one of these is going to be by itself connected to a wire going up, and one of these is going to be plugged into a wire nut passing through that power. So the one with the wire nut is the one that we don't need for the ceiling fan. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Now I'm still going to keep these wires together because these could be going to other locations. So I'm going to go ahead and put my wire nut back on. And then on the white wires, I'm going to remove. And the one that's connected to the switch that's going directly up to the downlight, I'm going to remove that white wire from this batch of wires tied together. So I can see which wire that is that's connected to the red wire that's with the switch. So I'm going to go ahead and get that wire untangled with all these others. All right, so now these two white wires, again, they could be going to other rooms. So we are going to put those back together and wire nut those. Again, it's very important that we don't install the ceiling fan until we do this step and make sure that there's 24 volts at the location where we're installing that ceiling fan, because we don't want to blow the ceiling fan motors. From the cabinet, I have the wire that's going to be supplying power from the 24 volt driver that we just installed. And here I'm going to go white to white, and I'm actually going to utilize Wago connectors. I highly advise you get these connectors. They make life a lot easier. Put the wire in, clamp it on. It's a lot easier than wire nuts, especially when you're dealing with low voltage. And then I have the existing power that was attached to the 51 volt wire nut, and that's going to be attached to our input power. So I'm going to use Wagos on that as well. So now we have power coming in to our switch. Our whites are attached to pass through power up to the light because we're switching on the red. Now we have our 24 volt power supply attached into the switch and up to the current light fixture. Now we can go ahead and put the switch back and go ahead and install our ceiling fan. Now I do want to make a note that if for some reason you don't have a toner, you can always use a multimeter. And what you would do in this scenario is at our cabinet, we have all those wires. You hook up your 24 or 27 volt power supply and individually put those home runs into that power supply and go to your switch location and put the multimeter up there to see which wire is getting 24 volts. Now, you could also hook up the power supply to an outlet around, and then you can go back to the switch and basically do that in reverse, where you have your power into the upgrade wire and then go back to the cabinet and do the same thing, figure out which one of those wires is receiving that 24 volts. You can also use continuity that way. Whatever you're comfortable with, you can utilize. So there's a lot of options available on the market to make that work. Okay, so now we're in the process of installing our ceiling fan. So the first step here is to get our mounting bracket on. A ceiling fan does come with two very long screws. Those are the screws you're going to use to install your mounting bracket. If there's other screws or the screws for the lights, you can use those as well. Then we have to install our stem on our motor. It's just a threaded screw. You have to undo one of the set screws inside the motor, screw this on. Before you actually screw on the stem, it's important to put this cover plate on. Plenty of us made the mistake before not putting that cover plate on. You'll have to unthread it and then put it back on again. So when it actually comes to the wiring, the ceiling fan comes with a red wire and a black wire. So in this scenario, the wires coming out of the wall are going to be red and white. So we're just going to go red to red and then white to black. And once we've done that, we're going to tuck all our wires up, back in, and then put our cover plate on. And we're gonna tighten our screws on the plate. And then the next steps are going to be to install our blades and then finally the light kit. All right, so now we got our blades up. Now we're just gonna install our light kit. So for this, there's a red and black wire up by the motor. You're gonna go black to black and red to red. Oh, and the light turns on, it works. So we're gonna tuck these up, and then there should be 2 slotted screw holes that we're gonna match up to the screws that are coming farthest out of the motor. Putting on the light kit, there's 4 screws. If you're struggling getting the holes to line up, I suggest taking all 4 of the screws out and go one by one. Start with the first screw in the slotted hole. Make sure it matches up on the other side. Then input that screw into the hole. And then you have your light kit up. The only last step is putting on the cover plate. So for the cover plate, you got these notches. So these notches are gonna fit in to the holes, and then you spin it so it's tightened on. We installed our batteries into our remote. Now we can turn the light on, we can turn the ceiling fan on, and now we have a working 24-volt ceiling fan.